And we're back. Hi guys. Sorry about that. So I wanted to do another part of this that was actually part of a seminar I do at Widener undergrad programs, and what it is around is anxiety and how to manage stress, levels of stress, especially as a student, which you all are. So I'm just doing part of it. I'm not doing the whole thing because you're all adults. You've been through the undergrad program, your own undergrad programs, and so you probably have your own coping strategies for how to manage stress. But what I wanted to do is give you some additional things to add to your toolkit as far as how to calm yourself down when you're feeling elevated, when certain responses are at play. So here is a graph. So this graph talks about stress and how stress can be important. And what it means is that when you're really dealing with stress, this looks a lot like a bell curve, and it is. So if you have no stress at all, chances are you're going to have a really hard time being motivated to do even the most menial things. If you're not really motivated to eat, like you're not going to cook a meal, you're probably just going to eat whatever's available when you have to. If you're not motivated to do the work you need to do by a certain deadline, you're not going to be at your peak productivity. What you want to do is make sure that you have a certain level of stress that encourages you to get your work done in an efficient way, but doesn't get to the point where you're right here and your stress becomes distress. And when you're distressed, your body actually starts breaking down and is not as able to function as it would be typically. So this is the peak in which things start making you more tired and you're actually able to produce less. And so you want to really stop and think about how to de-stress when you get to the point where you're distressed, if that makes sense. What you really don't want to do is push yourself to the point where you are incapable of really continuing, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in a bit. Alright, so you all have probably already known some of this, but if you do experience stress, if you have a diagnosis of anxiety, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But your body reacts to the trigger the same way no matter what the trigger is. So if you're confronted with, let's say, a bear, your body's physical responses are going to be the same as if you're encountering a stressful conversation with your professor. And what that means is your body's going to go into the same mode. You're either going to fight, flight, or freeze. This doesn't include the freeze component, but that is definitely a component of what people do when they are confronted with a stressful situation. And so when you're in that situation, whichever coping strategies you use to manage it or get through it, your body still somatically responds in the same way. Your heart starts to race. You get that nervous sense of energy that makes you fidgety or makes you pace. You find that it's a little bit more challenging to breathe or catch your breath, and your train of thought is typically perseverating or ruminating, and you can't focus. You're having a hard time focusing or maintaining attention. When that becomes the case, it's really hard to get through and be your best productive self. So what we're going to go through is some of the different ways in which you can control that physiological response and manage to move through them. We talked a little bit about distress and when it starts to become more and more of an issue and a deterrent to being productive as opposed to something that's going to help you meet a deadline. And these are some of the beginning signs of when stress becomes detrimental. You're definitely going to experience fatigue. You're going to have headaches. But as you go down, if you start to feel the inability to sleep, if you feel compromised as far as you're feeling ill, you're not able to fight off infection, those are times you're really going to want to stop what you're doing and get guidance, or at least come up with a very concrete plan on how to manage. Let's skip that. So this, I mean, these things you probably know. If you're stressed out right now and you all are probably a little bit stressed out, and that you're adjusting to taking an online course alongside whatever else you do in your life, whether it be raising a family or working full time or all of the things that fill up your day. It's probably hard to juggle it and on top of all this online coursework. So these are the different things that concretely you can do and implement into your day. But these are the different physiological symptoms that can sometimes, I'm going to move you over here, that can sometimes become an issue. And so something to think about. So the mob scenario, I'm not sure if there are any gamers in this particular group besides me. But basically, if you're in a situation where you have a lot of different things coming at you at the same time, you're going to want to pick off the low-hanging fruit. You're going to want to find a place that you can take care of one thing at a time without getting overwhelmed. And then you're going to try and do the most damage over time. Alright, so when stress becomes anxiety, it's very trendy to say that we're anxious. Not to say that anybody isn't, but a lot of times I think folks say anxiety when they mean stress. And so you're going to want to differentiate the feeling of feeling a little panicky to having panic attacks or having your anxiety impact your life in a major way. And so a lot of us have already worked with a lot of folks who do have disabilities or mental health diagnoses, and so anxiety becomes a diagnosis when you're afraid of the stress, right? You're not just stressed out because you have a lot to do, you're feeling fear in response to the things you have to do. And so does that stop you from being able to go out in groups? Does that stop you from being able to complete a test? How does that stop you? And so if you feel like that stress and the fear resulting from it does impact your life in a major way, I'm going to implore you to seek out assistance, talk to me, talk to anybody, and just start the process of working on yourself. If you ever experience panic attacks or anxiety attacks, typically it's going to look like these 5 things. The feeling of dying is probably the strongest indicator. A lot of people feel like they're having a heart attack when they have their first panic attack because the symptoms are so somatic. You can actually feel the tightening of the chest. You can feel the hardening of your esophagus, like the way that it's more challenging to breathe, and your body starts to tense up, and it feels completely physiological. So these are some things that you should think about in order to manage those symptoms. We're going to talk about some of them. The top ones are probably the most obvious ones. Caffeine is going to be an extremely strong indicator of if somebody's anxiety symptoms are going to be worsened. So if you have anxiety, if you have panic attacks and you're drinking a lot of caffeine, definitely going to encourage you to tamper it down a little. Caffeine is a very strongly associated drug as far as increasing symptoms of anxiety, which is terribly sad for me. Alright, so all the other things that we're talking about, the coping strategies at place, they're going to be talking about these 2 hormones. So these 2 hormones give us the greatest amount of hormone imbalance in regards to experiencing anxiety, specifically those physiological symptoms we're talking about. So I'm sure you guys know, because you're in the mental health field, how many mental health diagnoses can be traced to chemical imbalances in your brain. They can also contribute to an imbalance in hormone level and the endocrine system can actually start to reinforce thought patterns and brain chemistry patterns with the presence of these throughout your body. So cortisol is the stress hormone. Cortisol is the hormone that really helps you as far as being able to avoid danger. It helps you run faster when you have to run because of a dangerous situation. It helps you think quicker, but it also helps or hurts in a number of ways, in that it's a slow burning hormone. It's something that or quick burning, once you've used the high energy parts, you're very fatigued afterwards, and you're kind of hit that wall. It increases your blood pressure. There's a lot of poor results from it. Testosterone, however, is typically the hormone most associated with confidence. So as you're feeling more comfortable in a setting, more take charge, taking more direction, you're probably going to have a higher level of testosterone. Leaders naturally have a higher level of testosterone. Unfortunately for the women out there, men naturally also have a higher level of testosterone. But what we're looking at is levels comparatively to ourselves. So if you naturally have a baseline of testosterone and you're feeling exceptionally confident, there's going to be an increase. So even if your baseline is 10 versus 26, so for like a female, if my baseline was 10 and I'm feeling particularly confident, so I'm able to elevate my testosterone level to 15, that's really good for me. A 15 for a guy will probably be extremely low, and so he would be far less confident. So we're not talking about like an advantage necessarily, although it certainly is in some situations. But that's debatable, and that's a rabbit hole we don't need to go down. But so that's something that we can manipulate. So all of these things are things we can manipulate. So what we're going to talk about the ways to do that. The first is going to be posturing, which seems like malarkey, but I actually really love the research that's put through. I don't have it in here, but Amy Cuddy does really good work around posturing. Amy Cuddy is a professor in the Northeast. I forget which school. But I definitely would recommend looking into her. Amy Cuddy, I can actually email you guys some more information about her. But she's doing a lot of studies now about the different ways we can manipulate cortisol. And so she's showing how a lot of these positions that she's talking about, these higher power positions versus low power positions, actually increase or lower the amount of testosterone and cortisol in our body. So as you make your body smaller, like this bottom row here, actually I think I can do this. Hold on. Alright, so this bottom row here, it's actually heightening your cortisol level, lowering your testosterone level. However, this row is doing the opposite. So if you take up more space, you're able to really elevate your... Oh, it's Harvard. It's written right there. She's at Harvard. If you take up more space, you're able to really elevate your testosterone level, gain confidence. She really recommends people doing that even for a short period of time. They take cheek swabs in the study. I mean, you should definitely read into it. The studies are amazing. But she takes cheek swabs before and after the posturing and measures their levels of those two hormones. And so even holding a position like this center one here, where she's doing this one, which I think they call the Wonder Woman pose, it even for as low as a minute is able to, or 30 seconds to a minute in a mirror, is able to elevate and lower those levels into a place where you're feeling more confident, more comfortable, able to be more confident in your skin. So, yes. Other aspects of posturing include, you might have seen those studies that have come out a few years back about smiling and laughing and how that releases endorphins even when you're faking it. So if I were just to like hold a smile, which I can't because I got a root canal, so like smiling is extremely painful. But if I were to hold a smile for a certain amount of time, it would actually release endorphins, and that would increase my good mood levels. And so I recommend playing with your body in this way, and playing around with what can be helpful and utilizing that. I'm not going to have you guys practice, but I did want to talk about this, and this is going to be where I leave this video off, because after this there's going to be a number of other videos. Meditation and mindfulness is one of the most empirically proven ways to change your chemistry. There are just a relentless amount of studies that just bring this point home over and over again. I was the most skeptical person when I started the MSW program. I still, to this day, can't really meditate for more than 15 minutes to 20 minutes. But It is amazing, and I really, really encourage you to look into some videos about people who utilize this in really high stress, high impact situations. So when you're talking about people who have experienced warfare or have post-traumatic stress disorder, and grounding exercises is the only thing that can bring them back to the present, that is in the same umbrella as mindfulness. And so I really hold these measures in a very high regard, and I definitely think this is a practice in which you get out of it what you put into it. And by that I mean the ability to really try and give it the benefit of the doubt and keep an open mind, and then your end result is reflective of how clearly you were able to do that. Does that make sense? I feel like I just rambled. The thesis being, the more you're able to commit to the mindfulness practice, to just try it with an honest, open heart, to do your best at it without doubting it, is when you get the most out of it. So what I'm going to do, you're going to have 2 to 3 videos after this one. I am going to run a few mindfulness practices. I do that all the time here for Widener, so I want to do it for you guys. And I'm going to make sure there are things that are replicable. And by replicable, I mean things that you can do at home with just some like peaceful serenity sounds. And so I want to make sure you have those skills as you go through, not just your MSW program, but as you go through the rest of your careers. And hopefully it will be helpful. But I will request that you give it a try. None of them are more than 5 minutes long. 2 of them are going to be like 2 minutes long. So if you can commit to 2 to 5 minutes a day, you can do this. It's only 3. Alright, so that's going to be it for me. I will see you soon with these mindfulness videos.